He's a journalist and film critic who has covered the movie industry for nearly a decade. Matt Neglia joins us for today's episode of Evergreen Spotlight. His podcast, Next Best Picture, is the latest in film critique and Oscar considerations. I'm your host, Julie Holliday, here at Evergreen Podcasts, and if you're eager to dive into the world of high-profile interviews, keep listening as Matt shares his invaluable expertise. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us, and welcome to Evergreen Spotlight.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
My first question is, we all have opinions, but how does one become a film critic?
There is no easy way to answer this because everyone's path is a little bit different. It's not a mathematical equation that says if you do this, this will happen. I think for me, it was just I started my website and I started writing reviews for every movie that I was seeing, and I was always going multiple times a week. So there was a level of consistency there. And you have to be passionate about what you're doing. I think it also helps, too, to be social, because I was able to reach out to other people and elicit help and assistance from those who still are with me to this day, working on the site alongside me. And I think that getting them to understand what my vision was for the site and helping it to grow was something that I knew from the very, very beginning. And it's evolved over time in terms of like what the goals were and what we were all hoping to get out of it. And as it got bigger, that obviously changes. But at the end of the day, I knew what I wanted it to be. I knew what I wanted for myself. And I knew that in order to get there, I just needed to do the work and then just do my best to put myself out there and connect with people, because so much of what this industry is founded on are relationships and collaborations. And, having a podcast such as the one that we have, it allows for us to be able to invite guests on. I'm able to go on other people's shows. And as a result of which, you just end up networking and start building that out more and more over time.
So you really had a really clear vision for what it is that you wanted. Have you always been passionate about films and watching movies?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Since I was a kid. I mean, it started off like most people where you watch the cartoons, the animated films, like maybe by Disney. Then, for me, it was like Batman, Jurassic Park, and a bunch of other things such as that. And then it's like I saw The Lord of the Rings when I was 11. And for my generation, that was my Star Wars. So that was a huge turning point for me in terms of just getting me really invested into the filmmaking process and getting to understand how films were made. So from there, I started, back then you would go to the library instead of looking up stuff online, and I would go and take out books, and I would then rent movies and watch as much as I possibly could on VHS, DVD, eventually Blu-ray. Now we have 4K UHD. I'm still watching physical media. I'm a big proponent of that because they come usually with the special features, which tells you about the making of the film, or you get audio commentary tracks. And these all help provide levels of insight into the craft. And it's something that I took with me as I got older. I went to film school, collaborated with people, and made short films and things of that nature. And then that all eventually became analysis commentary, both in podcast and written format on the site. I moved away from production and just went over into that realm because at the end of the day, I think for me, even going back as long as I can remember since I was that kid, I've just loved sharing with people how much I love this art form. And I want people to appreciate and understand this art form the way that I do, not just as entertainment, but as truly that, though, as a form of art and something that can be dissected, analyzed, and discussed. Because the more you discuss it and the more that you share opinions with people, the greater your empathy will build, the greater your curiosity will build for understanding human behavior, other cultures. And I think only through that can we then progress as a society.
Is your favorite part of a film the end product, or is it sort of all the production that goes behind it?
I mean, I think it's twofold. I will always, That's interesting because there's like one movie in particular from this year, for example, called The Creator, where I didn't like the end product, but I found the behind the scenes making of it to be so fascinating that it allowed for me to have a greater appreciation for it, even though the whole movie in the end just didn't work for me. And I think that a lot of movies are like that sometimes, where getting a bit of insight into the process of how something was made can spark my interest and allow for me then to have a deeper appreciation and understanding of what went into it. And it does then help to kind of contextualize my adoration for it, or maybe even also further my disdain for it, depending on what information I learn about it.
What made that production specifically so like overwhelmingly great for you, like that pre-production or that production?
Yeah, specifically with The Creator in general, they did a lot of guerrilla filmmaking tactics, and they also had a very, very tight, close set. It was a film that was shot on a modest budget compared to other blockbuster studio films. This thing wasn't like $200 million. This thing was shot for a fraction of that amount. So to do so, it kind of like harkened back to like independent filmmaking days, but the end result was to create something that would give off the impression that it was $150 or $200 million film. And they were able to achieve this by shooting on actual locations as opposed to green screen, and then having the visual effects not overwhelm the story, but support the story in subtle ways that in the end, your brain doesn't fully then register that these are visual effects that are on a more minute scale. We're so used to seeing visual effects on such a grand, large scale where it's like everything you see in the frame might be a visual effect. And here it was like a small fraction of it was, but that small little piece of it helped to sell you on the believability of the world because everything else was real. Everything else was tactile, and you could feel like you were actually there while the story was taking place. And I think that just helped with the immersion aspect of it all.
Especially in a world of so much technology. You're a member of the Critics' Choice Association, and I wonder if you could explain like what you do on that.
Mostly, I just vote on the end of year awards for the nominations. I also do get to vote on other award shows that are also done throughout the year for them, such as the documentary awards. Sometimes I function as a member of the nominating committee for that. So I end up seeing a lot of documentaries throughout the year. I always watch a lot of documentaries in general, so that just seemed like a very natural fit for me. But ultimately, it's an organization that's been around now for a number of years, and it is one that I am proud to be a part of. I have a couple of friends who are also involved in it as well. And it's interesting because in recent years, they've like kind of taken on this identity of we like to predict the Oscars, like, oh, we're the best predictors of the Oscars. And I've just never, as a member, like subscribed to this belief of, oh, I need to have my vote count and it needs to like go towards someone that I think has a chance to win the Oscar. I vote for who I think is my favorite, period. Plain and simple. That's it. And I don't really think about, oh, my vote is being wasted by going towards someone who has no chance of winning or something like that. But it is very interesting to see how over time, like, the identity of the organization has changed. The voting membership has changed. So they've allowed so many new people to come in, including myself. There was a period of time where they wouldn't allow podcasters to come in. It was primarily meant to be for broadcast, radio, television, things like that. And so, I was part of like kind of like a new wave of people coming in. And I have to say, like, every time I go out to LA for that event, or if I'm just speaking with other members or whatever the case is, like I always have a great time and have the utmost respect for, my fellow CCA members.
It's wonderful. And speaking of which, your social media is dripping with pictures with celebrities. And I wonder if you could tell us about some of your favorite people that you've been able to meet along the way.
It's funny because I think it's important, like, for people to understand that I'm a fan first, in the sense that, like, first, not like today, like that's like my priority, more like I was a fan first. And so when I meet certain people, like that inner fan is like, wow, oh my God, I can't believe I'm in the presence of so-and-so. But then like at the same time, there's also, well, hold on though, like, there is also a degree of professionalism. You know, you might be interviewing these people, or you might one day be interviewing these people for something or another. And, you know, you don't want to come off strong or anything like that. But there is a kind of, hey, savor this moment, take this in. And I mean, I think for myself, it's like, I know that whenever I meet someone like for the first time, you know, I'll kindly, politely ask if they would like to take a shot with me. And then it's like every time I meet them ever after that, I never need another photo or need or anything like that, because there's just no point. But I would say that like some of my favorites that I've met, I mean, I met Martin Scorsese this year, and to me, like he is my idol and my god, and I worship him. I think he's the greatest living director that we have, maybe of all time. And so, just even getting a chance to talk with him was truly special. Pretty much brought tears to my eyes. And I would also throw out there. You know, there's a lot of like craftspeople, like people who aren't necessarily like famous, but like for me, I'm just such huge fans of their work that I tend to just geek out over what they've created and ask a lot of questions, like on a technical level, like things that like most people would not be interested in hearing me discuss, but they love it. I love it. And I think that they appreciate that that I want to get a better understanding of the work that goes into crafting like a film score or a soundscape for a film. And so meeting like someone like Ludwig Göransson, who did the score for Oppenheimer this year, and talking to him about that, or Daniel Pemberton, who did the score for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, one of my favorite films from last year as well. You know, it's like I love talking to people who are behind what, for me, after having seen their film, like just had such an indelible impact on me that it's like I need to understand the creative process behind how you were able to get me to feel this feeling and talk to me about that. Because, you know, if you can get like a little bit of a piece of like understanding of what goes into the process, I just think that it also then helps strengthen you as a critic, as a viewer, and gets just a better appreciation and understanding for like I said, the art form in general.
Speaking with, celebrities and people that are in and produce movies is one thing, but then you actually having them on your show. How do you align these interviews? How can we do that? Give us all of your secrets.
Well, I mean, I reach out to their managers or their publicists. Sometimes they will reach out to me directly. The studio is another way you can go through this, although that has a lot of channels. It can be a little bit more, it can take a little while for something to come together with that. But I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. I'm fortunate that I'm in a position now where a lot of people are just coming to me with these offers. And then it's just on me to try and figure out, okay, how am I going to schedule this and fit this all in? Because we do so many now. And to be honest with you, I actually think we could do a little more. But, you know, we're doing hundreds of interviews like every year now, which is like I feel very, very special and very lucky, like I said, to get kind of this behind the scenes insight into the process of making movies that we love and appreciate. And I think our audience appreciates that too.
Definitely. And you talked a little bit about your team before, but it's not just you. It's a team. It's a we thing. Would you want to tell us a little bit more about your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So my team is, oh man, my team is amazing. I love them. I adore them and appreciate them so much. I don't think that this would be what it is without them. I know that a lot of people like always like will say, "How you're being too humble. Don't sell yourself short." No. It's true. I'm only one person, and I have a day job on top of everything I do with Next Best Picture as well. There's no possible way we could do all the things that we do if I didn't have help. That's why so many members of my team are also conducting these interviews and are part of these panel discussions that we do once a week, every Sunday, or for our reviews on Saturday. These conversations, these discussions to me are super important because I don't believe in just speaking into this microphone and trying to convince the world my opinion is right and you all should listen to me and I'm not going to allow for any outside opinion whatsoever. I know some people that do that sort of thing and I just don't think that's the way to go about this. I would much rather bring a group of people together, hear all of their opinions, and let there be a free-flowing exchange of ideas and thoughts and information that once again allows for you then to hopefully walk away with a deeper understanding, appreciation, or a different perspective in general. Maybe you walk into a review with an idea of how you felt about something, but then you walk out after hearing the conversation and go, wow, you know what? I didn't think of that. That is so much better than I initially thought. And it just makes you maybe want to go back, rewatch the film, or you just simply learn something about yourself along the way. These are the kind of transformative moments that I love having featured on our show. And I hope that our audience also gets the same feeling from that as well.
Do you have a specific example of a film that you thought one way and then after speaking with the cast and crew, you felt a different way?
Cast and crew and my team and also rewatches, yes. There's one specific example I can think of right off the top of my head, and that was, 2019, a film called Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler.
Yes. Oh, that's a good movie, yeah.
Directed by the Safdie brothers, written by them as well. This movie drove me nuts the first time I watched it. I remember hearing later on that there was like a sound issue with the film at the theater I was at. It was like, I do remember it was excruciatingly loud, and it just rattled my brain, and it was not like in a good way, you know? Like I can watch loud movies and I'm totally cool with that. Like I just watched Dune recently in IMAX and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like my seat's shaking and this is great. But for some reason, this movie was so discomforting to the point that I actively just did not enjoy my experience whatsoever. And I walked out of that with such negative views on Adam Sandler's character, on the movie, everything. And so when I watched it again and I met the Safdie brothers and I also met Adam and, you know, we were all talking about it at the second time I was seeing the film, I brought up how I wanted to give it a second chance, and I did, and I'm glad I did because it actually ended up, and I think I saw it one more time before the end of the year, so I saw it like 3 times or something like that. It ended up on my top 10 list at the end of the year simply because that was a movie that through just talking with people and, you know, I think sometimes too, being in the right frame of mind. I know so many people who I try to like convince them to watch movies and they'll say, oh, I'm not like in the right frame of mind for this right now. I need to like really be like dialed in if I'm going to devote 3 hours or whatever it is to discussing this right now, or just sitting with it, experiencing it. It's a commitment, and some people are just not really willing to sometimes make that commitment, and it's hard for them. So I find that being in the right headspace helps immensely. And I remember for that first viewing, I just wasn't in the right headspace either. So that can also play a factor. I think that just simply being open to changing your mind is something that is super important. Remember, once again, I'm not here to tell people this is my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's unbreakable. You have to subscribe to it. That's not what I'm about. I'm always open to anyone else's opinion and changing my own. And if it means that like I'm able to get a better understanding, like I said before, or change for the better because of it, then I'm all for it.
That's a common theme that I'm picking up with you, Matt, is that you have possibly a strong opinion about the subject, but as far as convincing others or needing it to be the only way, it's not something that you really push very hard for. You're very open-minded, and it seems like you respect others' opinions as well.
I just see so many people doing it, and I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. And I see it so much on social media. I see it a lot on YouTube. You know, I feel like we get aspects of this in our lives from our day jobs, or even when we watch the news and we see our politicians and world leaders talking a certain way. And it's just like very, I think, cult-like in its own like sort of weird brainwashing sort of way. And I'm not about that. Like for me, that's not what I want my platform to be. And listen, I have strong opinions sometimes. Don't get me wrong. I really, really do. And I know that some people will probably sit here and say, hey, I heard you one time say, no, this is how it's going to go. And I'm like very, very strong about it. But, you know, I think that that's a human impulse maybe sometimes, which is brought on by passion. And then what happens is if you have that moment to allow yourself to that, you know, have that passionate response, whatever it is, you then just got to make sure you're aware of it. You catch it, take a breath, take a step back, and then get back to the core beliefs of what I was saying before.
It's wonderful advice that you can still stand strong on a soapbox and not have to bring everybody up there with you. You can just say what your opinion is, and everyone should be given that chance.
Nobody wants to listen to somebody who doesn't have strong opinions. You know, people do want to hear people that do have opinions, but they don't want to hear you be a complete asshole about it either.
Well said. What do you think the common bones of a good film are? Do you believe that there are maybe some structural things that really great films have?
Story and character. Those two things for me have always been the bedrock of what can make a film, whether the budget is super low, whether it's a short film, whether there are certain elements that could be really bad sometimes. Maybe it's shot poorly, or it doesn't have great visual effects work. But if your story and if you're invested in the story and you care about the characters, that will go so far to erasing other elements. You won't even notice them. That's the thing, is that you'll get so sucked in that you won't even be looking for problems.
Do you think it's just learning about the characters' specific backgrounds? Like, is that how you get to know them?
I don't think so.
In your eyes, like, okay, yeah. Can you explain
I do think that
more?
there is attachment to certain performers and actors that do sometimes you bring into the experience. I do get that. And I think a lot of people do that sometimes, especially if the role is like somewhat meta in a way, where it is kind of like playing cute with, oh, we know the audience is going to feel a certain way about this actor, and we're going to use that to our advantage in telling the story. An example I could think of off the top of my head was something like Anthony Hopkins in The Father. That's a devastating movie. It's so harrowing, and it gets you to cry at the end. The character's name is Anthony, and we know Anthony Hopkins, and watching him go through this experience that is so relatable. It's painful to watch then someone who you like have had this attachment with for years and years on screen go through something that is so based within reality that you feel like you're watching it actually happen to that person. And I think, that elicits then an even stronger emotional response. So yeah, that would be like an example I could think of with something like that.
That is so good. And just seeing someone go through something relatable is really how we are then connected even more on a human level. Thank you for that insight. Love that. What advice do you have for podcasters in general? Maybe some of your favorite things, some of your not so favorite things about the art of podcasting?
Yeah. So I would say my advice is be consistent. It is the number one thing that is, I think, the hardest thing is being consistent. For many, many years, I did not have the best sound quality. We didn't have the best microphones or anything like that. And I still today, like even compared to other shows out there are other shows that I still think sound better than ours, but we've always been consistent and we've always given the audience what they want. We elicit feedback from the audience. I think that's super important. I also think it's important to understand which feedback is important and which feedback is clearly just somebody has a personal issue and that's not a broader problem. So it's being able to understand the difference between the two, but eliciting feedback both internally and externally, because you also got to listen to your team, figure out what's working for them, make sure the environment is comfortable. Because, if you're going to have a show where you have people, either guests or you have a panel of people, like I said before, this is not a one-man show. I might lead the discussion, I might host, and I might help with the agenda. But at the end of the day, this is a collaborative effort. And so without everyone feeling comfortable, you can't produce, I don't think, a show that is going to have the level of quality that you're hoping for, because then everybody's not going to bring their A game to it. But consistency, I would say, is the number one thing, because, if you put people on a routine schedule where you become part of their daily routine, whether it's their commute to work or when they're doing laundry or whatever it is, that's very invaluable. You become part of people's lives, and then their attachment to you becomes very, very strong. They feel like they know you. And I think that can then help with obviously word of mouth.
That's something I love about podcasting. I feel like it's like my number one companion, where it's like if I'm doing the dishes or I'm eating dinner, like what am I listening to today? You know, it's this really intimate relationship almost. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us some of your inside like tips and different ways that you go about your interviews and talking with others. We know you have such a busy day even today working in the film industry. So thank you.
No, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for just taking a moment here with me. I will never, ever pass up the opportunity to just talk about how much I love this business, how much I love podcasting. Anyone who knows me knows that I put literally everything I have into the podcast. I'll go out of my way to see movies that I know are going to be terrible, but because that's the main release of the week, without it, we don't have a show. Once again, going back to consistency. And it's like, for me, like I feel an obligation to want to show up for the people who have showed up for me. And so I take that very, very seriously. And I hope that, you know, this conversation has just allowed for people to just get a little bit of an insight into what I'm all about, what the show is all about. Watch the show or listen to the show. Either way, just subscribe to the show.
I love it. And we love listening, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Evergreen Spotlight. If you're a film enthusiast, check out the podcast Next Best Picture, hosted by Matt Neglia. Search it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Julie Holliday.